Welcome to another episode of They've Got Now. I am really excited to be joined today by one of my favorite broadcasters in basketball, someone with a great mind for the game, but also brings an awesome amount of enthusiasm, which I just think we always need more of, and that's Rahshaun Haylock. Rahshaun, first off, I appreciate you making the time. Second of all, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate when I got the message from you. I was surprised. I was like, oh, I finally get to talk to Mark. So this is
Okay, well, now you're
fantastic.
making it sound like I think I'm too big for everybody or something. Not
I
at
know. I
all.
mean, look, anybody that follows the W knows that you're one of the premier. You're one of the premier voices. So it means a lot. Just to hear from you and for you to reach out.
Well, that's extremely kind, so I appreciate that, man. But no, it's yeah, I've been wanting to get you on for a minute just to talk about the Sparks in general, because that's what we're doing today. Now that we were talking about it before we got on, like this has been like the least break I've ever had, and the W starts up in a week, and I'm like excited for it, but also like I don't know, man. All I can think about is like I don't know how I'm gonna get off of my Olympic schedule where I've been like going to bed at 12 and waking up at like 5:36 every day. And then I think like, how do these athletes come back from that? Because that's even more jarring to me. But yeah, man, how have you been handling the break? What are you what's kind of the vibes heading back into the W season for you?
Yeah, their turnaround is going to be a lot more challenging, I think, than
Yeah.
ours. More abrupt, to say the least. For me, man, it's been I've been proud of myself from a sense that I've actually had like some downtime. Like I've actually got to chill a little bit. So as soon as the first half of the season ended, next day, wifey and I got out of town to celebrate our anniversary. So we are down out for a few days. And then it's once I got back, it's pretty much been a lot of Olympics and some daddy daycare mixed in between. But it's been good. Been able to get some rest, and it's always strange, right? Because this season is so truncated, right? Like, I mean, you have a very short camp, and then you get into it, and it's all these games back to back to back to back. Then all of a sudden, here we are, and it's this month long break, and then you start over again, right? So it's going to be interesting to see like what the startup is going to be like, because I mean, these are some very important games that are coming up, right around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of what's going to be so exciting too is like, I mean, like I was telling you before we got on, I mean, this is my first time that I've ever gotten to be around an Olympic break. So um, I'm just interested to see how that kind of plays out. Because actually, last time we had an Olympic break, the Sparks won a championship. That's not going to happen this year. But when you look at, just in general, like 2012, the Fever were almost 500 when they went into the Olympic break, and they had everybody but Tamika Catchings was back in Indiana practicing and getting that extra time together. And then they came back, put their best basketball together, and ended up winning a title that year. And I don't know. I think that's part of what I'm so fascinated about because the top of the league, obviously, I think I'm just of the camp that I'm not going to vote against the Aces until I see them lose a series. I feel like they've earned that much in my mind. But there are like five teams you could all kind of picture as like, yeah, they could make it to the finals. And that feels a little bit different than past years. So I'm just interested to see how that all kind of plays out, especially like, what about the teams who maybe don't have as many Olympic athletes or teams that do have a lot of Olympic athletes? How does that impact? Because I don't really know. There's so much up in the air with it.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a lot of unknowns. I feel like the teams that that have less players over in Paris right now, the least amount of players, uh, may have a leg up, at least for the first week or so, right? Just because the continuity, they've kind of been together for the most part. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. This is my second break. My first season, I want to say we had a break. Yeah, 2020, because that was the 2020 Olympics held in 2021.
Mhm.
And so we had a bit of a break, and then it was just that season was just strange altogether in the sense because we were playing at the convention center, and then
Yeah.
we came back from the break. We were at Staples for the first time, and Sparks knocking on the door of a playoff spot, and feeling the energy of what was called Staples Center at the time for the first time was incredible. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be very, very interesting. But I think you're a smart man with your Vegas thoughts.
Yeah. I think anybody who look, man, The early season worries, I was like, man, no, we don't have to do this. We don't, this is they don't have Chelsea Gray. It's like, it's we'll see. Like, yeah, exactly. But
Well, look, to that point, we didn't help, right? I mean,
yeah,
we were able, the Sparks were able to knock off the Aces twice. So once without Chelsea, another time with Chelsea in the lineup. So that didn't help to all the noise that was happening around Vegas, so to speak. But I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think they are the team to beat until somebody beats them. But I think New York. I mean, I think those are the two teams for me.
yeah. No, I agree completely. I do have to diverge for a second before we fully dive into the Sparks. As somebody who also has done a lot of great work broadcasting, RIP to the Pac-12, did you see the Big Ten commercial, the new Big Ten commercial that spawns literally across the country? Because that's like the most real it's felt for me.
I haven't seen the commercial. I've just seen little things here and there on social media. Thank God for the Olympics, right? Because
Yeah.
it's created quite the distraction from the local teams here, local schools, USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten conference. But and I saw a billboard and I saw another message, something to the effect of the Big Ten conference kind of taking all of those championships and now claiming them as their own.
Yeah, the ACC claimed all of Katie Ledecky's medals from Stanford. I was like, come on, man. Like, be real here. Like, no, no. It's
So that's kind of the extent. I haven't dove into it too much. It still seems kind of surreal, in a sense. Um, I don't think it'll really hit. I mean, we've seen logos, we've seen the big patches on, we've seen pictures of like the big on the court at Galen Center, but I don't think it'll hit until like that first like conference football game for like SC or UCLA. Like, oh, okay, like this is a real thing.
yeah. Yeah, man, it's jarring. So the aforementioned commercial is like, I mean, as a kid who grew up in Big Ten country, that's like, forever for me. Like, I'll never forget that the first time I saw a commercial. So like seeing it made with they're showing us freaking Long Beach and Hollywood and Oregon. And I'm like, what on earth? And it's definitely different because I'll never forget, like, I mean, dude, when Nebraska gets introduced, I'm like, well, Nebraska's not Big Ten country. Well, everything's Big Ten country now. So
Same here. Same here. And I mean, we can go on this thing for hours, dude.
yeah.
Like it was this whole realignment has been very, very interesting. But I will say this. We don't have to dive in this too much, but I will say this. The Pac-10 at the time was sort of ahead of its time when you think about the network. They're right after the
Mhm.
Big Ten. But I don't know if you remember this. There was talk about Texas and
Oh, I
Oklahoma
remember. Trust me, I remember.
joining
That's
the
like
Pac.
right after Vince Young. I'm like,
And
oh,
we thought it
you
was
know?
crazy. We're like, this
Yep.
is a bunch of nonsense. Why on earth? That doesn't even make sense geographically, yada, yada, yada. And lo and behold, a few years later, they were talking about San Diego State joining the Big East. And then there was, and now here we are, where we are. And the Big Ten is literally gone coast to coast. The ACC is pretty much coastal, but you got, they kind of expand coast to coast as well now with the additions of Cal and Stanford. So it's so long to the great rivalries of my youth.
Yeah. No, exactly. Dude. I think about that a ton because, man, mentioning Texas, now all I can think about is like, well, they turned down that offer, made Longhorn Network. Nobody saw their games, and they went 9-4 a bunch. So, guess that's what happens. But let's talk about the Sparks now. I think you have to start by talking about Dearica Hamby's season, because I think first and foremost, like obviously shout out to her winning bronze with 3x3. But she has been, I mean, in my opinion, right now, she would be, if I had to cast my vote, she would get most improved player. I think often when you look at, a player of her stature being talked about most improved, like obviously a player who's been an all-star before, it feels like out of left field. But to me, I think when you actually look at her game, it's very much played out that way this year. So, in terms of looking at this season from her, from being able to, see every game up close and personal and being around her, what's maybe stood out most to you that people wouldn't get to see on a regular basis?
I think it's the determination. I think she was determined coming into this season, and to that point, I didn't quite think about her and most improved until probably during this break, in all honesty, right?
Yeah.
Because it just didn't kind of, because she had already been an all-star, she's a champion, things of that nature. But then you look at it and, you go by, Satu winning it last year. I mean, that would kind of be in line, right, with this award. And so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the leap she's taken has been tremendous. But the things that have stuck out to me, or for me, is the determination. She's come back just I don't want to say a totally different person, but you can see the change and the evolution in her from a mental standpoint. And she's been on record, talking about this. Like, the majority of her offseason was spent working on her mental game, like not even being on the floor and working on basketball skills, but she was just trying to get her mind right. And you can tell just the focus she had coming into the season, knowing that she was going to have a much larger voice in that locker room and a much larger role on the floor. It's that. And then also the footwork, which is crazy to me, because and I say this not meaning any disrespect, but like, she's not a trained basketball player. Like, Dearica Hamby was a softball player growing up, right? So she's pretty much self-taught. But you see some of the footwork, and she's dream shaking and things of that nature. And it's like, wow, like you would think she went to, whoever's skills camp or whatever, right? But that's not it. Like, it's just instincts. It's just her learning. And it's just the way that she learned the game. And so I think that part has been extremely impressive to me. And the one thing that I kind of always go back to with Dearica is just seeing where she is, not even now, where she was at the start of this season, right? And I go back to Mother's Day 2023, and it was a closed door scrimmage. It was at Loyola Marymount University, Gersten Pavilion, against the Seattle Storm. And it was the first time she had ever put on the purple and gold, 2 months postpartum from having her baby Legend. And she was out there, and she was able to do a couple of things, but you could see, she was kind of laboring, getting up and down the floor. And I mean, it's tough. Like, she just had a baby, right? Like, I mean, you give her some grace, but she ended up playing the entire season. She played all 40 games, and which was an injury-riddled season for the Sparks to an extent. And seeing that player and the impact that she had for that Sparks team last season, and an even greater impact that she's having now, she's just turned it up a notch. It's been phenomenal. But I like to say that I'm surprised. I'm not really surprised, because in a sense, she looks more like the Dearica Hamby that I knew and enjoyed watching when she was in Vegas. She's just touching the ball a lot more.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point, because to me, exactly like you're saying a little bit, like, I think some of this is just like her. I mean, she has a career high usage this year. That's part of it. But I think, like you hit on with the footwork, I think part of what made her such a good player with Vegas, obviously, like, she's just a very multifaceted player. And I think, like, you go back to, playing in, like, when she's winning Sixth Player of the Year and stuff, I think often you look at a player like her and the way that the game's evolved, like, when you go back that time, people are looking like, oh, well, she's kind of a tweener. What spot does she play? How do we kind of fit her in? And now it's like, I mean, she literally does everything for the Sparks, and at a high level. Like, she can do pretty much everything on offense. And I mean, you can even talk about, like, she's having like the best shooting season of her career. But like, she's a good passer. She can play out of the pick and roll, both as the ball handler and as, somebody on the other side of it. She can screen. She just does everything. And like, again, like you mentioned with the footwork, I think she's always had the ability to do a lot of these things, but like, the consistency is just so different this year. And I think, kind of like you mentioned a little bit with Satu, like, to me, that was the biggest thing with Satu last year. Like, she went from a player who was capable of, she could have a game where she had 25 points and she showed all the things, facing up and attacking the basket. But then it became, okay, I'm doing this every night player. And I think you see that this year just as much with Dearica. And it's been really impressive to watch. And worth noting too, like, this is one of the most efficient seasons of her career. It's the most efficient one she's had since the bubble. And yeah, it all stands out in that regard. One of the best passing seasons of her career, if not the best. She's rebounding the ball at a career high clip. Like she's just everything is hitting that much harder. And it's really hard not to be impressed with it.
Yeah, I call the games, and I'm fortunate to have, a front row seat for most of this. And it's gotten to the point where I'm surprised if she doesn't get a double double. And as far in terms of points and rebounds, and you noted her passing, there was a good part of the season she was leading the Sparks in assists per game. Like she was literally doing it. It was points, rebounds, assists. Like she was doing it all. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the 3-point shooting as well, because she's become a viable threat from outside. Where last year she took a lot of threes, and I think admittedly she took some of those kind of because she was open, right? And teams were giving her that shot. Teams can't give her that shot anymore because she'll make you pay. But then if you close out on her, she's athletic enough and can handle well enough where she can go right by you. In addition to being able to operate on the block, and all of that on top of the fact that, yes, she's more involved in the offense this year. And, Kurt's calling her number. Kurt Miller, the head coach of the Sparks, is calling her number, more often. But this is also a player, and one of the things that I've always enjoyed about her and liked about her game is she needs 0 plays called for her because she's going to get her own, right? And so we're still able to see that aspect, in addition to the fact that she can be a go-to player, which she has been for this team. And it's been incredible. It's been very fun to watch. It's been a highlight for sure for the Sparks season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's got to be kind of interesting for her too, because technically the second oldest player on the team as well. So I feel like that's kind of a different role for her as well in terms of being like, I am that veteran presence in the locker room. Obviously she had, cachet with the Aces, of course, being there, since they were in San Antonio. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting to kind of watch that all piece together, especially, getting to see obviously from afar how everybody interacts has been very cool. But I want to play off of that too. And just looking at this season as a whole, I think, 6-19, I mean, 6-18 doesn't fully capture what this season has been for the Sparks. I think, as we had talked about with the Aces earlier, like have been competitive throughout the year, like without a question. Worth noting all the injuries too. Lexi Brown has unfortunately still been dealing with Crohn's disease that has kept her out of a lot of games, and sending thoughts to her, hopeful that she's able to get back and just get right, and has been able to get the most out of this break. But even, aside from Lexi, like obviously Cam Brink had a phenomenal start to the year, showed a ton of promise, had the unfortunate knee injury that is going to keep her out the remainder of the season. And then up and down the lineup, like it hasn't been as bad as last year, because last year I think is the most injured I've ever seen a team in basketball. This year is pretty close to it though. It's felt like. So, in terms of like, analyzing that and how the team has kind of approached that, what does that look like for you and kind of piecing through that?
It's been tough. It's been a lot of games missed. And for Kurt Miller, now in the second year, he's never coached a game for the Sparks with a full complement of players, even including the preseason, honestly. Mm-hmm. So in his 2 seasons now in year 2, he's never coached a game with a full complement of players. So it's been tough, right? And I feel like this team has taken on so many different versions of itself this season alone, right? And you started off the year, Laisha Clarendon getting a triple-double out of the gates, Rickea Jackson coming off the bench. We had a period where Lexi Brown was running some point guard. And then you had the emergence of Brown and Ari McDonald providing a huge lift off the bench. Look at the Sparks bench points. A large part of that is due to, those two and what they were able to do so successfully during that period. And then and all this done without Azrae Stevens, who just returned prior to the end of the first half of the season. So, I mean, it's been tough. It's been a lot of different lineups. It's been, a mishmash of players. You've seen some players take on larger roles at times. Some players have to take a step back. I think one thing that has been consistent, though, with the exception of Dearica Hamby, who's been phenomenal so far this season, I think it's just the ability to look within. And I think Kurt Miller's done a very good job at that, and not being as results based or results oriented, but just kind of focusing on doing things the right way, so to speak. And so I think that's been a huge goal. I mean, make no mistake about it. Everybody knows that this team is in a build, right? And you thought last year was year one of the build, but then Neko Gumake decides to leave and head to the Pacific Northwest. And so now this is kind of year one, right? Kirk Miller acknowledges this really is year one of the build. You got, two of the top 4 picks in the draft. And so it's been interesting, but it's been a lot of growth. I think Kurt Miller uses the term unintended consequences a lot. And some of the unintended consequences of these injuries have been what we've seen. Like, had Azurá Stevens been in the lineup, would we have seen this version of Dearica Hamby? Would we be seeing the Rickea Jackson that we're seeing right now? I think there's a lot of things that you can point to and look at, which ultimately will lead to good things and lead to growth for this franchise. But right now, it's just, you're kind of taking your lumps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can go from there right away to talking about Rickea, who has been, I always loved watching her play in college, and getting to see her, expand herself in the pro game has been very fun as well. And I think, to me, she's probably the best analog of looking at this team, is like having multiple iterations, like you mentioned, like, came off the bench to start the year, then was playing as more of like a 4th or 5th starter. And then now, like the last 10 games, she's almost, like, obviously not playing point guard, but she's kind of running a lot of the offense when you get to the half court. So I wanted to ask, like, what has been, watching this, Rickea kind of morph throughout the season and acclimate at this level.
Yeah, go back to the whole unintended consequences thing, right? That Kurt Miller likes to talk about a lot. I think one of those is the fact that to start the year, she was playing a lot more 4, right? And part of that was due to Azurá Stevens' injury. Another part of that was due to, there were times where Cameron Brink would be in foul trouble, so Jackson would have to come in there and play the 4. I think the franchise thought that they were getting an extremely versatile player who can play both. I think that they really coveted that when they drafted her. And she's shown the ability and the propensity to be able to play both the 3 and the 4. But I think, make no mistake about it, she's at her best when she's playing the 3. And I think as of late, you've seen a whole lot more of her playing in that 3 spot. And I mean, Rickea Jackson is a bucket getter. Like she just is, right? And she's unafraid of the moment. She's unafraid of the stage. She just gets after it. And you've seen as the season has progressed, as she's gotten, more comfortable in this league, just her ability to be able to believe in herself and go after her own and get her own. And so I think she is, if you're the Sparks and you're building this thing, right, you look at perhaps a go-to player or a bucket getter, I think you circle number 2, right? I think she's the one for you, right? Obviously, Cameron Brink brings a lot of great things to the table. Her defensive presence is, without question, one of the best in the league. And if you're in analytics, you look at some of those numbers, you see just how much of an impact she made for the Sparks defensively when she was on the floor versus her being off the floor. But I think that's sort of her bread and butter, right? She can do some things on the offensive end, but Rickea Jackson, that's where she's going to make her money, on that offensive end of the floor. And we've seen it. It's been great seeing that evolution. It's been great seeing her get more comfortable in terms of facilitating and initiating the offense, like you just saw. And so I think the step for her, just like all rookies, is consistency, right? Just being a little bit more consistent. But I mean, she's embraced LA. LA has embraced her. She's getting it done on the court and off the court. Shout out to her. She's got her Skechers deal that was announced here during the break. And so, I mean, I think you have to expect big things from Rickea Jackson.
Yeah, worth noting too. So just in July, which was only 6 games, but still, I think it was noteworthy. She's averaging almost 16 points per game, 5 boards, and almost 3 assists. And like you mentioned, I think even the assists don't necessarily fully capture.
But it's the assists, though. Like, it's when the season first started, she was just scoring, right? Like she was like hovering around that like 1 assist per game, if that, right? And as the season has progressed, you starting to see her facilitate a little bit more. Not that she's a selfish player, ever was a selfish player, but I think just the comfort level of being in the offense and like, what am I looking for and where's the ball supposed to go? And, I can see the team, as opposed to just being focused on maybe one thing, which, I mean, these rookies come in here, they get they get a ton of stuff thrown at them, right? So you're just trying to compartmentalize and do one thing at a time. But I think that to me, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Mark, because seeing her evolve from that standpoint, I think is only going to allow her game to flourish even more.
Absolutely. Like to me, I think I have no questions about her as a scorer. Like of course, there are ways she can get more efficient. I think like becoming a more consistent long range shooter is going to be one of those. But like you're saying, to me, the biggest thing is like just how she reads the game. And I think you've seen her that last couple weeks, like really just like she's making those second level reads. She's slowing down a little bit. And again, when you talk about a player who's her size that can score in that many ways, but can also keep the ball moving, it's like every player that can do that in the league is an all-star that has the same kind of archetype, which is really exciting. And even on top of that, too, one of the things that I've like, at least to me, has stuck out. It's a random thing, but like she's been so much better attacking the glass over the last month. Like, um, I'll have to ask, Kurt about it sometime, but like it just feels like she has had a much better understanding of like when to cut, when to duck in, when to see things. Because there were times earlier on in the year, part of what's difficult to me at least about being more of that combo forward, if you don't have the ball in your hands, is how you like you talked about with Dearica, how do you find your offense when you're not necessarily part of the play? Because that's I mean the biggest part to me of becoming that consistent all-star is if you don't have the ball in your hands, how do you still impact the game? And to me, like having a player like Rickea, who is, if she occasionally has like a small switched on her, or if she has the ability to go in and get an offensive rebound and get extra points, like that's how you add 6 or 7 points per game to what you do. And her seeing that to me is just as big an aspect of reading the game as anything else. So yeah, I've been so impressed with her this year. It's not, I expect her to come in and play really well, but for her to continue to make these leaps inside the season has been really fun as well.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. Just watching that maturation, as you mentioned, just from the start of the season to where she is now, and how it's evolved, and the confidence, right? I mean, it's the confidence, right? I used to do a podcast. A good buddy of mine, he played in the NFL. He said confidence comes from doing, right? And
Mhm.
so she's seeing that, okay, I've done this, like I'm doing it, right? And it's allowed her game to take off even more. And I think she has a lot of skills. I mean, a lot of skills. I mean, you think about the one leg fall back from the elbow. You think about the way she's able to maneuver and operate on the low block, right? Like that effective spin move that has allowed her to get to the rim, like you just mentioned. Um, she's got a lot of tools in that toolbox. I think to your point, the 3-point shot, I think that will come, eventually. But being able to put it on the deck and blow by people, she's got I mean, she is a certified, she is a professional scorer. Make no mistake about it. And so I think the trajectory for her, and you said it, all-star. I mean, she looks like she's headed towards that way, and that's only good news for the Sparks.
Absolutely. You mentioned her name for a second, but I want to talk about Azurá Stevens because to me, like again, when you look at that last 4 games that she came back and played, granted, it's 4 games, so you don't want to get crazy, but like this is why you have a player like Azurá Stevens. 15 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, has been really active and very good on defense. I've always loved Azurá, number one, because she's awesome human being, really cool person to be around. But like when she's healthy and her game is on at 6'6", like mobile, sees the court well, like there just aren't a lot of players who can do that. And when you like having her paired up with D and Rickea is like that. There have been, and we'll talk about it in a minute with guard play, but when you have that trio in the front court, that just opens up so much for you, even in a quote unquote like build year. Like I think that has really stuck out to me. What have you thought of Azurá since she's gotten back and able to kind of come back from this injury?
Yeah, it's you it kind of going back to what you said earlier, right? Just so many different iterations of this team. The next time she steps on the floor with Cameron Brink will be the first time they're on the floor together,
Yeah.
right? So that's the unfortunate side of this thing, right? Because I mean, you're looking at 6'5", 6'6". You got 6'7", 6'8" Lee coming off the bench, right? That's a lot of size that people are going to have to contend with, right? And unfortunately, we haven't seen the whole thing just come together, but she she has been impressive, and I think just kind of take you behind the curtain a little bit. She is incredibly selfless, right? Maybe one of the best teammates that you could ask for. Um, she was injured to start the season, right? Never missed a practice, never missed a road trip, was getting worked at practice. Like from a conditioning standpoint, just obviously it's game shape is game shape, right? But the training staff did an excellent job of doing as much as they can to try to keep her there or as close to there as they possibly could, right? So during practice, she was always working on her cardio, and then later on, she started to, kind of once she was clear for contact, she was able to get in some of the drills and stuff. But I think it was one of those things where it looked better than I thought it would look, to be in all honesty, because she hadn't played in months, right? And so she comes in and immediately makes an impact. But it's the confidence in the 3-point shot for me, which she shot it effectively well. And then it's always been the shot blocking for me, because sometimes I think people see Azrae Stevens and they don't necessarily consider the physicality of her game. I think that's something that goes unspoken or unnoticed a lot. But she can get down there and she can bang and she can clear out some stuff. And that I really appreciate that about her game. In addition to, getting all the rebounds, averaging nearly a double-double in her return. But I think it's worked tremendously well, right? It takes some pressure off of Dearica Hamby because now she doesn't feel like she has to get every rebound. I think if you looked at the rebounding, it's been Dearica Hamby, and that's kind of it, right? I mean, you kind of get a little bit here and there, just from a rebounding standpoint, but I think Azrae gives you another legit rebounder, which is huge, right? Especially for a team that has had some issues giving up second chance points. And so I think that's going to be huge. But seeing them being able to play together, which, I mean, we saw at points last year, I think the way it happened was just tremendous. And Azrae came out of the gates just blazing. And I expected her to have success. I didn't expect her to come out of the gates as hot as she was. And it was almost like you didn't want that first half to end for her. I know she certainly didn't, because she had got off to such a great start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's been really fun to watch because again, just somebody who like when you talk about multifaceted, like I think you can say that about a lot of players on this roster, but she is the one who comes to mind like first and foremost. Because again, just having
yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, you're
and
good.
another thing too, right? Like you go back to you tell I hang around Kurt Miller a lot, right? You go back to those unintended consequences. I believe it was her first game back. And you talk about the different iterations of the Sparks team, right? Like Stephanie Talbot went from not playing at all to becoming like a pivotal piece, right? Someone that you wanted and needed to have on the floor. I think it was Z's first game back. Talbot left the game early with some sort of a foot injury. And Azrae comes back, she's on a pitch count. And I'm pretty sure they kept her to that minutes restriction, but it was pretty close, right? But she ends up getting kind of thrown into the fire, right? I don't know that she was expected to play as much, with as heavy minutes, especially with that first unit as she did, because she was coming off the bench. But because of Talbot's injury, then all of a sudden Z's thrown right into the mix, and it's like, okay, here we go. And she steps up to the challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Plays 25 and a half minutes in that first game against Phoenix and then, closes out the 4-game stretch with 24 and 15 in a really tight game against Seattle. So I just can't wait to see what it looks like for her coming back in this iteration. But, you mentioned Lee Rue for a second, and that's a really great transition point talking about this team because it's something I've thought about a lot. It's actually something I just wrote about today. But like, you look at this team, and I think the biggest thing that's going to come up is guard play, which I get, and I think it's a fair thing to bring up. Worth noting too, this team made the trade for Julia Alman. She was expected to come in and be the starting point guard and got injured just shortly before the season started. Unfortunately, had another setback while was going to play for Belgium in the Olympics. That unfortunately didn't happen. Just hope that she's able to get right from that, but you look at what Lee has been able to do. And I know, like, again, Lee is the perfect example of you look at the box score and you maybe don't really think too much. Playing what, like 12 and a half, 13 minutes a game. But like she is becoming like a real W player. And that, that she struggled to get minutes with Chicago originally in 2022. And granted, that was a very talented team. But I think you look now, like she's been a player who has for quite a few years been very good and productive for the Chinese national team. Was really good in Turkey this last year. And I think you start to see her like there. It's not consistent yet, and it's worth noting she's still only 25. But like she's really starting to take the turn of like being a productive W player. And again, she's 6'7". She can really move. She's starting to get better at making plays with the ball in her hands. That's really exciting. I feel like you can say that about so many players in this roster. Like you're starting to see stuff. The consistency is starting to come around, and there's stuff to be excited about.
Yeah, prior to the season, Kurt Miller called Lee the most improved player in the world, right? Just talking about the global game as a whole and what she's able to do with the national team and, also, playing overseas. And she just had a great Olympics, averaged a double-double, 17 and 11. And so you're hoping that will propel her back into the W season. But the organization likes her a lot. And you have to like her a lot to be able to allow her to be on an opening day roster instead of some of the players that the Sparks unfortunately had to let walk away, right? And these are not easy decisions to make, what have you. I mean, we talk about this at the beginning of every season, right? And people are calling for expansion and, roster expansion and also just overall team expansion, right? Because so many great players are left on the outside looking in. And, but the team they really like Lee. They stood by that. She makes the opening day roster. And I think we've seen her grow in increments throughout the course of the season. She's had some tremendous games. There was a game against Dallas where, she's battling against, Tierra McCowan and, having what was a double-double. It was a double-double, but I believe it was 10 points, 10 rebounds, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the league went back at it and they took away one of those rebounds. So she ended up officially with 10 and 9. That would have been her first career double-double had it held. But that was very impactful, but also kind of showed you something like, okay, she can not only is she skilled enough, but like she can bang against one of the best bigs that this league has to offer. And she had another great output out in Seattle earlier this season as well, had a career night. And so I think you see it in bunches. I think the step for her, and this is just coming from the coaching staff, is being confident in finishing, especially when you're right near the basket, right? I think there are times where I don't know if she's just unsure or unselfish or may not know where she is at times, but it's not having being reluctant to go right back up with the basketball. And so I think, once she we saw her take strides in that area, once that becomes a little bit more consistent, I think we'll see it. I mean, she's got a sweet touch. She can step out to three. She can obviously, work on the low block. But I think just being able to use her size as a weapon in a good way, I think will go a long way for Lee.
No, I totally agree. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of talking about like she plays just a little bit sped up. And I think like you watch her play overseas and in any capacity, and it's like there's like a 10% difference in how she sees things. And it's like exactly like you're saying. If she just goes right up with stuff, I think she's got the touch, she's got the size. And I just am a believer that it's going to come around because she's
got
really
all the support from her teammates.
Absolutely. Everybody seems to love her, which is really cool.
She is just she's just a joy to be around. She's all Kurt Miller had a very funny story at media day. He said, I believe it was Kurt, it may have been Reagan who said this, but she's always smiling, right? Like even when Kurt's getting on her, like she's got a smile on her face. She just enjoys what she does. She enjoys being there, enjoys being with her teammates, and they love her too. But I think she can be very. I think that next step. I mean, you can see the promise there. You can see why the franchise is so high on her, and it's coming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just created her TikTok the other day, I believe, just this week
nice.
when she was in Paris. So for anybody who's not aware, I'm not on TikTok. I don't plan
I'm
on
not a
getting on
TikToker
TikTok,
either, so
but
you got me on that one.
I drew that line of demarcation last year. I was like, I don't know if I can extend myself out to that one. I'm already like 1.5 apps of Twitter and Instagram's enough for me. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the guard room though. I think that's a good place to close out on and just kind of what this whole group has been like. Um, what have you felt and seen from this group as they've kind of tried to piece things together throughout the year? Because again, like we mentioned, a lot of injuries, kind of a lot of figuring things out consistency wise. But I think there's been some good stuff here as well.
Couple things. I think Kurt Miller's a tremendous coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league from an a scouting standpoint. And I mean, he's a scout for Team USA, right? I think he's so detailed with his scouts. And you can see that from game to game, opponent versus opponent. And that's the reason why the Sparks have been in so many. I don't want to say that's the only reason why, but a large credit to that. Obviously, the players got to go out there and do their part. But a large credit of that goes to Kurt Miller and his staff for being so detailed as it relates and as it pertains to those scouts, right? To those scouting reports. He is so great, such a great basketball mind when it comes to that and being able to break down each team. And we saw that last year. It was my first year, getting to see that up close. And we're seeing it again, this year as well. 2 wins over Vegas this season. That's no small feat. Whether they had injuries or not, they're still one of the more talented rosters, if not the most talented roster in the back-to-back champions, right? I think there's that. I think there's just the fight that this team has showed every single night. Like, despite the injuries, no let up, next player up, everyone's sort of taking responsibility and buying in. And I think the leadership standpoint too, you talked about Dearica Hamby earlier, and, she's one of the vets on this team. She has embraced this role tremendously. Like, she don't play when it come to Cam. She don't play when it come to Rickea. Like, those are her babies, right? And she'll let anybody that has a question about that, she'll let anybody know. And so just her willingness to be able to step into that role and want to take that role on has been great. I mean, you're seeing her getting it done both in the locker room and on the floor as well. And so I love that for her, and I love what she brings to this team. I think going forward, it's just the growth. It's a shame that, what happened to Cam, but I think seeing Rickea continue to progress in this role that she has, and maybe even taking another step before the end of the season, I think will be huge for this Sparks team. And I mean, just getting a little bit more out of the guard play, whatever that looks like. I think Ari McDonald, you saw her kind of grab the wheel by the horns towards the end of that first half of the season. If she can kind of continue that play and go back to the Arizona area, as she likes to call it, I think that would be huge for this team. But I love their spirit. I love their toughness. I love their grit. I love their fight. I love how, every night they're in a game. I mean, it could be tough, as a broadcaster or covering a team when, the wins kind of aren't there. It could be even tougher on the players if the wins aren't necessarily there. But, they've been right there in every game. And look, this is pro sports. You don't get credit for, close losses or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is they come to work every day and they're ready to play, and they get after it for each other and for their teammates. I talked about how Dearica doesn't play with Cam and Rickea. This group loves Dearica. She has stood up and become the unquestioned leader of this team. And it's been great to watch, man. I think there's a lot more in store. I think the future is extremely bright for this organization, for this franchise. Taking some lumps right now, but it's going to be great to see just players take that next step and to see Azrae Stevens when she comes back the second half of the season and be able to continue what she started that first half of the season. You're going to see even different look Sparks than you saw in the first half.
Yeah, no, I think such a great point with Ari. I think she's a great point in terms of looking at potential. I think you've seen her have some absolutely phenomenal games, like the game she had against Las Vegas that went to OT, I believe was a career outing for her. She's had multiple games where she's able to score in double figures. You see the confidence. You obviously see what she does on defense with her pressure. And you see, like, Ari McDonald could be a starting point guard someday, like a real starting point guard on a good team. And then there are other nights, it's like, okay, you want to see her put that together because then you have the game right after that. She's not as confident from the field, or maybe doesn't quite have it going the same. And it's again like she just turned 25, putting that stuff together, finding it more. Or, I mean, she's about to just turn 26 when she gets back. Same thing. But yeah, exactly. I think you see the really good moments. Another thing too, like every time Ray Burrell touches the court, I think she's gonna do something positive. And always at
It's
full
like you're reading my
force.
mind,
Yeah.
Mark.
I love Ray Burrell. I want, again, when you talk about somebody who's dealt with a lot of injuries that I just want to be able to see stay healthy, which she has this year, that's Ray. Ray's had some awesome games the last couple of weeks when she's gotten more burned. Like that, again, they lost to Seattle, but they're not even close to in that game without what she does in that game. I like what she does defensively. I just, again, consistency. I want to see it keep coming along.
The first win against Vegas this season, Ray Burrell doesn't step on the court the first 3 quarters. She comes off the bench and just unconscious. I believe she had 7 points in that fourth quarter. I believe Rickea Master was 7 as well. In order to, and the Aces were coming. They were making their run. They were coming, and thanks to Ray Burrell being able to come out there, knock down a couple of huge threes, Sparks able to win that game at home in front of the home crowd. And don't think Becky Hammond forgot about that, because the next time Vegas came to town in her pregame press conference, she made sure to mention what Ray Burrell did to her and her squad the last time that they were in crypto.com arena. And so, yeah, I mean, you talked to her teammates. We had Lexi Brown on the broadcast earlier this season, and she's talked about just how incredibly athletic Ray is. And we haven't even seen, what she can do just from an athletic standpoint. And the thing for me was her 3-point shooting. If that 3-point shot could fall consistently, I think that would just open up things for Ray and her game at this level in particular. And for the most part, I think she shot it tremendously well. She got out at the beginning of the season shooting the 3 ball extremely well. Kind of tailed off a little bit here of late, but if she can get a little bit more consistent with that 3, with that athleticism, like you mentioned, I mean, she's got a lot. She's got a lot of skills, And you talk about Isaiah Cook, who, she had a tremendous offseason, and you can see it just kind of coming together. And Kurt Miller always talks about how it's maybe year 3 or 4 before players really start to kind of make an imprint in this league. I think there's a lot to be excited about in terms of Zaya. So there's so much. You look up and down this roster, Mark. There's so many bright spots. You can point to any player and be like, okay, I can see something there. I can see something with this person. I can see something with that person. And so I think it just makes for, just exciting times.
Absolutely. And to close off too, in terms of exciting times, season ended today. LA Sparks would have the #1 pick in the 2025 WNBA draft. So that makes it exciting as well. But we don't have to talk about that. That's a future thing. Rahshaun, is there anything you want to plug or mention before you out of here, man? I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, man. I appreciate you for having me on here. Anytime I get to talk Sparks basketball, man, it's a treat, man. I'm a young man, grew up right here in Los Angeles. I used to go to Sparks games when they played at the Forum as a kid growing up. A good friend of mine lived in Inglewood, and we hang out during the summer, and at the Inglewood YMCA every now and then they would have tickets for Sparks games, and we'd be at the Y hanging out. We'd head over to the Forum later at night, and watch the Sparks. And so before I was able to sit in this seat, I was a fan. And so this is just a treat, a thrill, just to be able to represent the team that wears the purple and gold inside crypto.com arena. So it's awesome. I appreciate you having me.
Of course, man. To everyone listening, of course, keep up with all things going on in the WNBA. Subscribe to the pod if you have not already, both on YouTube and wherever you're listening. Of course, keep up with everything Rahshaun is doing. He's going to do a phenomenal job, as always. keeping us as the voice of the Sparks. And most importantly, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening.